Have you been told your creatinine is too high? Are you wondering if certain foods can help lower it? Creatinine is a waste product that is removed from the blood by your kidneys. And if creatinine starts to build up in the blood, that's a sign that the kidneys are not functioning as they should. In this video, Dr. Hashmi and I will break down which foods may help lower creatinine, which foods may be raising it, and what you should be focusing on.
Let's talk about, can foods actually lower creatinine? So it's yes and it's no, and we're going to dive into the specific details. So foods cannot directly, and the key word here is going to be directly, lower creatinine levels in the blood, because creatinine is a waste product of muscle metabolism, and it's primarily filtered through the kidneys. Now, there is a caveat to this, and the caveat is that there are lots of foods that are going to influence this. But let's sort of back up a minute and just talk about creatinine being a waste product. So a larger muscle mass is going to produce more creatinine. And kidney function, your GFR, basically the more healthy your kidneys are, the more they can get rid of this waste product. So that means your blood creatinine will be lower. Same thing with hydration status. When creatinine is measured, it is a concentration in the amount of fluid. So if I go ahead and dilute or have more fluid on the bottom, it's going to make it look like there is less creatinine waste product in the blood, even though that is not the case. Now, when we start to look at foods specifically, and we're going to dive into it when Michelle talks on actual food items, but on a general scale, if you start to look at, for example, KDIGO. So KDIGO, which is Kidney Disease Improving Global Outcomes, the 2024 guidelines that came out, they actually recommend adopting a diet that is higher in plant-based foods and, of course, lower in ultra-processed foods. The reason for it is because plant-based diets, and you don't have to be 100, whatever you can do is great, because plant-based diets are rich in anti-inflammatory nutrients. They're rich in fiber, they're rich in phytochemicals. And the reason these three items matter is because these three items can lower the protein you're spilling in the kidneys into the urine. Remember, proteinuria or protein spilling in the urine is a sign of kidney disease, so you can lower that. Number two, you can lower metabolic acidosis, because both of these things, protein spillage and acid, are going to make the kidneys die out faster. By eating more of plant-rich foods, you're going to reduce the inflammation inside the kidneys, and you may potentially allow whatever is able to heal to heal. And as a result, yes, the creatinine can go down. So that's why I was saying there's a caveat of food making creatinine going down, because it's yes and no. So if you look at some of the studies, there's a study by Goraya et al., and what they showed was that as you start to increase the intake of fruits and vegetables, you can help manage metabolic acidosis, you can improve kidney function. And so they showed in that particular study that eating fruits and vegetables was as effective as sodium bicarbonate in keeping kidney function or creatinine levels stable over 1 year. So in other words, fruits and vegetables did the same work as a prescription pill that we would give you of keeping the kidney function stable. There's another randomized control trial. This is from the British Journal of Nutrition. They found that if you individualize renal diet therapy and you have protein restriction, you have sodium restriction, you didn't just stabilize kidney function, you improved creatinine levels. In other words, you decrease creatinine levels in patients who at baseline were stage 3 to 4 CKD. All right, let's dive into kidney-friendly foods and kidney-friendly liquids, specifically all the conversation around water. I see this all over the internet on people saying water, you have to drink like a gallon a day and all of this. And so the question becomes, what is the truth when it comes to kidney function? So first is adequate water intake or adequate hydration level. The reason it matters is it's going to reduce vasopressin levels. Remember, vasopressin is going to hold on to salt, get rid of potassium with it. It's going to hold on to water and reabsorb the water. So turns out that if you're adequately hydrated, you may reduce vasopressin, which in turn will reduce the progression of chronic kidney disease, because the data so far shows that really high levels of vasopressin are linked to worsening of kidney function. Now, that could be because it pulls salt back in, causes inflammation, and so forth. Now, there is the chronic kidney disease water intake trial, the CKD WIT. I swear there must be like all this money to be made in like coming up with clever names. But the CKD WIT trial, they found that increasing water intake did not significantly slow the decline of kidney function over 1 year. But, and there's always a but it did improve creatinine clearance and it reduced the plasma copeptin levels. Copeptin levels, what is it? It's a marker for vasopressin. So there you have it. So it reduced that, which meant that you were reducing vasopressin. But it gets more complicated. Now let's talk about, instead of the CKD WIT trial, let's jump into the CKD RAIN study. And the CKD RAIN study was, they looked at the median or average GFR was 32, CKD 3B. And what they showed was that both high and low water intake caused a faster kidney function decline. One more time. Too much water, too little water cause a decline. So when people say restrict fluids or they say drink a gallon, they are both wrong. So this U-shaped relationship becomes very important to understand in CKD progression. So what did they find was the sweet spot? Well, they were really comparing roughly around 1 to 1.5 liters of only water per day, which translated into about 1.5 liters to 2 liters of water per day. And what they found was that that sweet spot between 1.5 liters to 2 liters per day, if you went much lower than that, kidneys got worse faster. But if you went much higher than that, the kidneys also got worse faster. So keep this in mind, as anytime you hear anybody, including myself, on the internet, it's important to understand that the nuances really matter. Now, people who are really stage 1 through 3A, because remember, this study with a GFR of 32 was stage 3B. So 1.5, 2 liters is for stage 3B, 4, etc. But people who have stage 3A or less, or everybody who's walking around, for women, the optimal number was around 2 liters per day. For men was around 3 liters per day. So that's sort of to give you an idea of stages 1 through 3A, 2 or 3 liters. Stages 3B and beyond, 1.5 to 2 liters. All right, with that, let's dive into the next topic at hand, which is going to be on plant-based proteins.
Yeah, so we know that reducing animal protein and then avoiding excessive protein intake in general can help with creatinine production. And like Dr. Hashmi mentioned, it doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing where, carnivore has to fight 100% plant-based. As we mentioned, the goal is plant predominant and to swap at least some of your animal protein with whole minimally processed plant protein sources. And we can talk about lowering animal protein. Of course, the type of animal protein matters. Your red and your processed meats really should be the first line of proteins that you're wanting to reduce or eliminate from the diet. And then overall, you want to make sure you're not consuming excessive protein intake. And so when we talk about switching some of these animal proteins for plant-based protein options, there's lots of benefits. I mean, we talked about metabolic acidosis, but lower plant proteins are going to have a lower potential renal acid load. They typically will be lower in total protein, so they can help someone avoid excessive protein intake when they consume more of them. A lot of plant proteins are going to be rich sources of fiber, which we'll get in a little bit more to why fiber is so important for helping kidney function and lowering creatinine. But those are just some of the reasons why plant-based proteins are great choices. And for the plant proteins, things like tofu, tempeh, lentils, beans, other legumes are all great options. And of course, I know we'll get this question in the comments. It's about, well, what about potassium? And so there are both low, moderate, and high potassium plant protein options. So some lower potassium options are things like tofu, chickpeas, green peas, black-eyed peas. Moderate ones like tempeh would fall into that, even pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, other beans and lentils. And then, there could be super high potassium, like adzuki beans are really high potassium bean. But ultimately, the goal is to choose ones that fit your needs, your likes, your dislikes, and just experiment. Preparing some of these plant proteins can be scary when you're not used to it. We have other videos and recipes and information on how to cook and prepare these plant proteins, but making even just some of your animal protein swap for the plant protein can help with overall kidney health and potentially help with lowering creatinine production.
All right, let's dive into anti-inflammatory and antioxidant-rich foods to give you some specific examples. Now, keep in mind, the examples that I give, a lot of them are rich in potassium. So as always, you have to check your blood test. You got to listen to your own doctor. You got to listen to your renal dietitian so you know where your electrolytes are. Just because, once again, I'm recommending it, it doesn't mean that it would be right for you. So the first one is really curcumin. Curcumin is fascinating simply because of the fact that people understand it's anti-inflammatory. It's got rich antioxidant properties, but what most people don't realize is it helps to transform the bacteria in your gut. So remember, when we start to talk about uremic toxins are coming from your gut microbiome. That's why curcumin can be very efficient. Now, the next one is sulforaphane. Sulforaphane gets talked about a lot. If you're wondering what it is it's cruciferous vegetables, all those green vegetables like broccoli, right? So broccoli is awesome because of the fact that the number one killer of people on dialysis is heart attacks. What's sulforaphane really good for? Lowering the risk of cardiovascular disease. Flavonoids. Flavonoids are, found in all sorts of fruits and vegetables. The reason they're exciting is because they can lower blood pressure naturally. By the way, fruits and vegetables, they will have anti-diabetic properties, meaning they will lower your blood sugars. Don't, my other job is a lifestyle and obesity medicine doctor, and I get so many of my patients who are suffering from obesity as a disease, and they'll come in and say, I can't lose weight because I eat too much fruit. That is not true whatsoever. It is not the fruit that is causing the diabetes, and it's not the fruit that's causing your weight. Now, fruit juices, fine, that's a whole other monster, but not the fruit. Then there's berries. Berries are beautiful because the darker the color, the more benefits they contain. But whatever your favorite berries are, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, cranberries, I don't like cranberries, but no, I'm not going to be biased against you if you have them. But because of the fact that berries are so rich in polyphenols, what are they good for? Along with all the other benefits, the one that I'm very excited about, they can change the bacteria in your gut. Then when it comes to teas, all types of teas have a whole lot of benefits. But when you look at specifically data around kidney disease, that's green tea. So green tea, the catechins have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. And hibiscus tea is also very, very fascinating as far as that goes. And finally, there's beetroot because of the fact that it has vasodilatory properties. It can dilate your blood vessels. But keep in mind, all of these things can affect your electrolytes. So it doesn't necessarily mean go and start eating all these things. It means this could be a great part, and it means having a more of a conversation with your healthcare provider.
Yeah. And another thing to point out on those is a lot of them, even like curcumin, you can use turmeric, the spice in cooking, more safely than, don't take the supplement before you're talking with your doctor about it, but you can make a dish and use turmeric and get some of those antioxidant benefits in that. And cruciferous veggie wise, like broccoli is a more moderate potassium one, but things like, your cabbage and, is going to be a low potassium option. So there's always options for someone with kidney disease, whether it's low, high, whether it's finding it in the food form, potentially supplementing, those are all things that we want to educate you on, but then, have you go back and talk with your healthcare team to get individualized guidance. So, and you talked a lot, Dr. Hashmi, about gut health, and that is where the next kind of category of things that can help with creatinine levels comes in is fiber-rich foods, because fiber may help with removing toxins from the body, helping control blood sugar, and and blood pressure, and in turn, all of those things helping in the creatinine levels. And foods that are rich in fiber are plant foods. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% plant-based, but getting more fiber from whole minimally processed plant foods is going to be important. And that's going to be your fruits, your veggies, your whole grains, your legumes, your nuts, and your seeds. And there's lots of different potassium levels. I usually like to provide, at least in general in these videos, some of the lower potassium options, so it's relevant to a lot more people with kidney disease. But keep in mind, potassium needs are individualized. Some people may need to eat more potassium. But some lower potassium, fiber-rich plant options would be things like your berries, apples, pears, kale, arugula, cabbage, collard greens, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, for our whole grains, farro, barley, wild rice, chickpeas, green peas, black-eyed peas. I mean, there's so many options, and there are tons of other higher fiber foods that have varying potassium levels. I always, what comes to mind for me is always artichokes. Artichokes are a high potassium vegetable, and they are a very great source of fiber. And so it comes down to fitting it into your diet. One of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that diversity and variety is really key. And it's key for ensuring that you're getting adequate nutrients and vitamins and minerals, but also that is key for your gut health and your gut microbiome is that diversity. And we don't want you being like, okay, cabbage, apples, berries, and chickpeas are lower potassium, so those are the only plant foods I'm going to eat. We want you to have diversity. And so maybe it's chickpeas one day, maybe it's green peas the next, maybe it's tofu paired with wild rice and broccoli the next day. I mean, you can make these pairings to be fiber rich, but then still make it kidney specific for your nutrient needs.
See, exactly, right? Let's dive into foods to limit. So let's flip the table around a little bit. I'll start off with talking about animal protein. This is a difficult topic because I can guarantee you there's going to be a comment about somebody who's done the carnivore diet and has improved their kidney function. So remember, the definition of improving your kidney function isn't lower creatinine. If you weigh less because you went on a diet, whether it's keto, carnivore, low carb, plant-based, you are now producing less waste product creatinine. So just because your blood concentration of creatinine is less, and this is why even in the plant-based community, I'm very strong to point out when people say they reversed their kidney disease just with a plant-based diet, you have to really ask them, did you or did you not? So it's important to make that distinction. But animal protein, the reason it matters to us is the more animal protein you take, the more it changes your gut bacteria. Remember, it doesn't mean you can't have any. If you're somebody who does, more power to you, don't need to know about it. But high diets of animal protein, what happens is you get glomerular hyper or too much filtration. Once again, too much stuff is going through. And what does that do? That creates more pressure inside the kidney that damages what we call the ball part of the kidney or the glomerulus, and you start to get leakiness in the membrane, so you get protein spillage. And so the reason this ends up mattering so much is, one, the quantity matters, and that's why you'll see like KDIGO 2024, same exact thing we talked about, the kidney disease improving global outcomes. Did I forget a letter? I think that's it. But
no, you got it.
In it, it's 0.8 grams per kilogram per day of body weight. Now, keep in mind, this is not your body weight actually. So in other words, let's assume somebody weighs 400 pounds. We're not talking about 0.8 grams per kilogram. We're saying the ideal body weight. So that'll be substantially less because people confuse that. And they're actually having a whole lot of protein that their kidneys is now trying to filter. But the most important part is if you're somebody who says, look, I got to have more, the limit is really not to go above 1.2, 1.3. If you go above that, that is too much pressure. Now, in folks who are elderly who don't have kidney disease, you've heard me talk about the muscle building part for athletes, for folks who are older, is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. There are some people who are like 1 gram per pound. And listen, once again, as a kidney doctor, you have to understand there is a lot of acid load. Number two is as you start to think about the added amount of protein that you're getting, you're also getting more acid load that's damaging the gut microbiome. You're getting all of the phosphorus that's coming with it, and the phosphorus itself is going to end up damaging the gut microbiome and lead to inflammation and all that stuff. So you want to make sure that you're aware of it. Same thing applies to salt. We've talked about the whole vasopressin thing in the beginning of this video, that vasopressin is going to do what? It's going to lead to salt retention. It's going to lead to worsening kidney disease. That's why too much water is an issue, just like too little water. Sugar foods is really easy to understand, but let me pass it on to Michelle to talk about sugar foods. The one thing I'll tell you is I don't think people understand that there's so much hidden sugar these days. In just about every box, they're popping in some kind of sugar.
Yeah. And the sugar thing, we have another video on sugar. And, obviously the sugar intake matters for someone with diabetes, because we know that if you have high blood sugar, then that's damaging your kidneys. But even in people without diabetes, we want people to be minimizing and limiting the added sugar. This doesn't mean someone can never enjoy a sweet treat. But like you said, it can be hidden in a lot of things. And that's where for salt and sugar, ultimately reducing just the eating out and the ultra processed food really will make a big difference, because people don't realize where it's coming from. They don't realize that the sauce in whatever takeout they had has a ton of salt and a ton of sugar. And honestly, it has amounts that can be over what someone should have in an entire day in one fast food meal. And so we care about the salt and the sugar, for both of those things. And then, back to the sugar, and sweet treats and things like that. The other thing is to ensure that when you are having, some sort of sweet treat and added sugar source, that you have a fiber source with it, because that fiber can at least help to slow down, that digestion of that and how quickly or how much the blood sugar will spike. My favorite sweet treat is I make these peanut butter oatmeal balls. The recipe's on my website, but of course I use maple syrup in it. It has sugar. I control the portion because I make it myself, and each ball has 4 grams of added sugar, which is 1 teaspoon, which is minimal. But I also have oats in there, which is a whole grain and contains fiber. I add chia seeds and flaxseed to add more fiber. And so overall, there's 2 grams of fiber per treat, in addition to the 4 grams of added sugar. And so I think what we really hope that you guys get out of this is that look at those labels, look at those packages, and be mindful of things, and don't turn a blind eye to something and be like, oh, well, there's no sugar or there's no salt in it. If it's fast food, restaurant food, or ultra processed food, it probably has one or both of them. And it's not a never, ever, ever can you consume, but they do impact your kidneys and your overall health. And so we want people to be more aware of them.
All right, let's dive into the last topic, which is creatine supplements. Creatine is fascinating. It's not just for bodybuilding. The reason it's so important is it has tremendous amount of benefits that occur in the brain. And so more and more data, and that's why I take creatine myself. And if you look at the other channel, we have the self-longevity method, you'll see how when it comes to longevity, creatine in brain can actually be very powerful. So in general, creatine is considered safe, and there are clinical trials that show creatine supplementation does not impair kidney function in healthy adults, even in folks who have kidney disease. But if you take creatine, please tell your doctor, because it will raise the blood test for creatinine, because creatinine is the end product of creatine metabolism. So creatine breaks down, creates creatinine, and so that creatinine elevation will be misinterpreted as your kidney function is getting worse. This becomes very important, and you got to wait about 4 or 5 days after stopping your creatine supplements before you go and take a blood test. There's another study. This one was in the European Journal of Applied Physiology. They looked at type 2 diabetic patients who took creatine supplements, and they found no impact of creatine on diabetic patients who are at risk for worsening kidney disease.
So interesting. Okay, well, there you guys have it. I mean, like we said, no single food alone will lower your creatinine, but there are kidney protective foods and lifestyle that can better support your kidney function, slow that creatinine buildup, and possibly lower the creatinine. And we want people focusing on being adequately hydrated, swapping some of those animal protein for plant-based protein, avoiding excessive protein intake, getting plenty of plant-rich foods in their diet because they have fiber, they have antioxidants, they have anti-inflammatory properties, which are all beneficial for your kidneys. If you guys found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it, subscribe to our channel for some more kidney health made simple.